You think medicine began with sterile hospitals and caring doctors? Of course you do. That's the sanitized version they fed you in school. But tonight, while you're comfortable in your climate-controlled ignorance, I'm going to show you what really happened in the marble halls of ancient Rome, the perfumed chambers of medieval Europe, and the opulent bathhouses of Renaissance nobility. And when I'm done, you'll never look at your local spa the same way again. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. and you're scrolling through wellness influencers promoting their latest blood facial or vampire therapy. You think it's cutting edge, don't you? Revolutionary? Here's what they don't tell you. You're participating in humanity's oldest, most depraved medical tradition. A tradition so horrifying that entire civilizations built their healing practices around the systematic harvesting of human life force. The Romans called it sanguinis balneo, blood bathing. But this wasn't some metaphorical cleansing ritual. This was literal. Warm, fresh blood from gladiators, prisoners, and slaves poured into marble basins where the elite would soak their diseased bodies, believing they could absorb youth, strength, and vitality from the dying. The steam rising from these crimson pools carried the screams of the unwilling donors and the sweet metallic smell that filled those chambers. It's the same smell that haunts operating rooms today. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. It worked. Not because of magic, but because of something far more sinister. The blood wasn't just blood. It was a cocktail of adrenaline, cortisol, and terror-induced chemicals that the human body produces when facing death. These substances, when absorbed through the skin, created a temporary euphoria, a false sense of rejuvenation that kept the powerful coming back for more. The practice spread like a plague across empires. Egyptian pharaohs bathed in the blood of virgin sacrifices. Chinese emperors soaked in the life essence of conquered enemies. Medieval European nobility created underground chambers where they could indulge in their crimson addictions away from the judgmental eyes of the church. And in each case, the medical justification was the same. Blood carries life, and life can be transferred. What makes this even more chilling is how organized it became. There were blood merchants, specialized in procuring the freshest specimens. There were blood sommeliers, who could identify the most potent sources based on age, health, and emotional state at the time of extraction. There were even blood banks, not for saving lives, but for feeding the grotesque appetites of those who believed they could cheat death by bathing in it. The technical term was hemotherapy, healing through blood. But the practitioners knew it by more honest names: sanguis vitae, blood of life; mortis illusio, death's evasion, or simply the red cure. These weren't desperate peasants trying folk remedies. These were the most educated, most powerful, most civilized people of their time, systematically turning human beings into raw material for their twisted longevity experiments. And the worst part? They kept detailed records. Journals describing the optimal temperature for bloodbaths. 98, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, body temperature. Treatises on the best extraction methods to preserve the blood's vital properties. Even medical textbooks that classified different types of blood based on the donor's circumstances of death. Violent deaths were considered most potent, slow deaths most pure. The practice persisted because it was profitable, not just for the practitioners, but for entire economic systems built around human harvesting. Slave traders advertised their medical-grade inventory. Gladiator schools became blood farms. Even hospitals and monasteries secretly sold the blood of their dying patients to wealthy patrons. The line between healing and harvesting disappeared completely. But the real horror isn't in the past. It's in how seamlessly these practices evolved into modern medicine. The blood transfusion you receive in a hospital emergency room, it's using the same fundamental principle that drove ancient blood bathers, that life force can be transferred from one human to another. The difference is just packaging and presentation. Today's vampire facials and blood therapy treatments are marketed as revolutionary cosmetic procedures, but they're using the exact same logic that justified centuries of human exploitation. The only difference is consent, and even that's questionable when you consider how many people don't understand what they're really participating in. The scientific community calls this historical medical practices and dismisses the psychological and social implications. But I call it what it is: the systematic normalization of human consumption for personal benefit. And it never really stopped. It just got more sophisticated, more legally protected, and more socially acceptable. You can feel it, can't you? That uncomfortable recognition that your modern wellness routine might not be as civilized as you thought. That the line between medical treatment and predatory exploitation has always been thinner than you wanted to believe. That humanity's relationship with blood, with life itself, has always been more parasitic than healing. The question isn't whether we still practice blood medicine. The question is whether we've ever stopped. And, as you'll discover in this journey through history's most disturbing medical traditions, the answer will make you question everything you thought you knew about healing, medicine, and human nature itself. Because the truth is, every time you accept a medical treatment that involves human biological material, you're participating in the same system that once filled marble pools with the blood of the dying. The only difference is that now we call it progress. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every romanticized notion you have about ancient civilizations and their wisdom. These weren't isolated incidents of desperate people trying bizarre remedies. This was systematic. This was industrial. This was capitalism at its most primal and horrifying form, the commodification of human life force on a scale that would make modern pharmaceutical companies look like amateur hour. In ancient Rome, the blood trade was so sophisticated they had regulatory bodies. The Collegium Sanguinariorum, the Blood Merchants Guild, established quality standards, pricing structures, and territorial agreements. They had inspectors who would examine donors like livestock, checking for diseases, measuring blood volume, and even testing the psychological state of the source. A terrified slave produced more potent blood than a resigned one. Fear, they discovered, was a performance enhancer. The Romans perfected the art of what they called harvesting optimization. They wouldn't just kill their sources, that was wasteful. Instead, they developed techniques to keep humans alive while extracting maximum blood volume over extended periods. They discovered that slow, controlled bleeding produced blood with higher concentrations of stress hormones and adrenaline. The process could take days, sometimes weeks, with the victim kept conscious and aware throughout the entire ordeal. But here's where it gets truly nauseating. They turned it into entertainment. The same amphitheaters where gladiators fought to the death also hosted blood festivals, where wealthy Romans could watch the extraction process while soaking in pools filled with fresh blood. The screams of the dying were considered therapeutic, believed to enhance the blood's healing properties. The Romans had a term for this: dolor medicamentum, pain as medicine. The logistics were staggering. A single bloodbath for a wealthy Roman required approximately 15-20 liters of fresh blood. That's roughly the entire blood volume of 3 to 4 adult humans. Multiply that by the hundreds of elite Romans who indulged in regular blood bathing, and you're looking at thousands of people being systematically drained every month. The infrastructure to support this industry was massive, holding facilities, extraction chambers, transportation networks, and disposal systems for the drained corpses. The economic impact was profound. Blood became a currency. Slaves were literally valued by their blood volume and quality. Young, healthy individuals commanded premium prices not for their labor, but for their potential as blood sources. The Roman economy developed an entire sector dedicated to human fluid extraction, with specialized tools, techniques, and even architectural designs optimized for the process. Medieval Europe took this to an even darker level. The Catholic Church, publicly condemning such practices as heretical, secretly operated underground blood extraction facilities in monastery basements. They called it sanctified bloodletting, the idea that the blood of the faithful carried divine properties. Monks and nuns weren't just serving God, they were serving as raw material for the bloodbaths of corrupt church officials and wealthy patrons. The most disturbing aspect was the development of blood farms, specialized facilities where humans were bred specifically for their blood. These weren't temporary arrangements, they were generational. Families of donors were kept in controlled environments, fed specific diets to enhance blood quality, and subjected to regular psychological trauma to maintain optimal stress hormone levels. Children born in these facilities never knew any other life than serving as living blood reservoirs. The Chinese approach was perhaps the most systematically horrifying. The Ming Dynasty established the Imperial Blood Bureau, a government agency dedicated to procuring and managing human blood resources for the emperor's medical needs. They developed detailed classifications: virgin blood from unmarried women, warrior blood from defeated soldiers, scholar blood from executed intellectuals, and infant blood from newborns. Each type was believed to treat different ailments and provide different benefits. Chinese blood merchants operated with industrial efficiency. They had transportation networks spanning the entire empire, preservation techniques that kept blood fresh for weeks, and even primitive refrigeration systems using ice from mountain peaks. The scale was so massive that entire regions were essentially converted into human blood production zones, with populations managed like livestock. But the most chilling innovation was the development of living blood banks. Humans kept in a state of suspended animation, neither fully alive nor dead, with their blood continuously harvested through complex tube systems. These living corpses, called sanguis perpetuus, eternal blood, could provide fresh blood for months or even years before finally dying from the process. The Renaissance brought technological advancement to blood harvesting. Italian physicians developed precision instruments for blood extraction, German engineers created mechanical systems for continuous blood flow, and French chemists discovered preservation methods that extended blood shelf life. This wasn't primitive barbarism, this was cutting-edge medical technology applied to human exploitation. The economic records from this period are absolutely staggering. In 15th century Venice, the blood trade generated more revenue than the spice trade. Blood merchants were among the wealthiest individuals in society, often holding political power and social influence. They built palaces, funded armies, and established universities, all with money earned from human blood. The social acceptance of these practices is perhaps the most disturbing aspect. Blood bathing wasn't hidden or shameful, it was a status symbol. Wealthy families would host blood bathing parties where guests would soak together in communal pools filled with fresh blood while discussing politics, business, and philosophy. The casual nature of these gatherings, where human suffering was treated as background ambiance, reveals something deeply disturbing about human nature. The medical justification evolved into pseudo-scientific theory. Physicians developed complex explanations for why blood bathing worked, creating elaborate charts connecting blood types to personality traits, age groups to healing properties, and death circumstances to therapeutic potential. They established medical schools dedicated to blood therapy, with students learning anatomy not to heal, but to optimize human blood extraction. The most horrifying realization is how normalized this became. Account books from blood merchants read like grocery lists: 12 units child blood, 8 units virgin blood, 20 units warrior blood. Bills of sale treated human beings like commodities: one healthy male, age 25, optimized for blood production, previous stress conditioning complete. And these weren't aberrations. They were standard business practices. And the customers? They kept detailed journals about their blood bathing experiences, rating different blood types like wine vintages, comparing suppliers like restaurant reviews, and recommending techniques like beauty tips. The casual, almost mundane way they discussed human exploitation reveals how completely they had dehumanized their victims. The technological innovations were remarkable in their efficiency and horrifying in their application. Drainage systems that could completely extract blood from a living human in under an hour. Preservation techniques that kept blood fresh for weeks without refrigeration. Transportation methods that could move hundreds of gallons of human blood across continents. And recovery systems that could keep extraction victims alive for repeated harvesting cycles. But here's what makes this truly terrifying for modern audiences. None of this technology was lost. It evolved. It became more sophisticated. It became more legally protected. And it became more socially acceptable. The same principles that drove ancient blood bathing now drive modern medical practices, cosmetic procedures, and pharmaceutical research. The question isn't whether we're still practicing blood medicine. The question is whether we've ever stopped treating human biological material as a commodity to be harvested, processed, and consumed by those who can afford it. And the answer, as you'll discover in the next part of this journey, will make you question everything you thought you knew about modern medicine. Because the blood industry never died. It just learned to wear a white coat and carry a medical license. But the fundamental transaction remains the same. Human life force extracted from the many, consumed by the few, justified by the promise of healing. The only difference is that now we call it progress. You want to know the most disturbing truth about medical history? It's not that these blood bathing practices disappeared. It's that they evolved, adapted, and integrated themselves so seamlessly into modern medicine that we can't tell where healing ends and harvesting begins. The white coats and sterile environments are just better marketing for the same fundamental transaction that filled Roman blood pools with human suffering. The transition wasn't sudden. It was gradual, methodical, and absolutely brilliant in its deception. The 16th century marked the beginning of what medical historians euphemistically call the professionalization of medicine. But what really happened was the systematization of human exploitation under the guise of scientific advancement. The blood merchants didn't disappear. They became doctors, researchers, and pharmaceutical executives. The first medical schools weren't centers of learning. They were legitimization factories for blood harvesting practices. The University of Padua, established in 1222, became the blueprint for how to transform human exploitation into respected academic discipline. Students didn't just learn anatomy, they learned optimization techniques for extracting maximum biological value from human subjects. The dissection tables weren't just for education, they were production lines for pharmaceutical materials. Here's where it gets genuinely horrifying. The medical oath that doctors still recite today, "First, do no harm," was never about protecting patients. It was about protecting the sustainability of the human resource pipeline. Dead patients can't provide ongoing biological materials. The oath was a business strategy disguised as ethical principle, ensuring that human extraction could continue indefinitely rather than burning through the supply too quickly. The Renaissance brought the most insidious development, the concept of voluntary donation. But this wasn't the altruistic blood donation we know today. This was coerced extraction disguised as medical treatment. Patients seeking healing would be told they needed bloodletting to balance their humors. What they didn't know was that their extracted blood wasn't being discarded. It was being collected, processed, and sold to wealthy clients for blood bathing purposes. The medical profession developed elaborate justifications for these practices. They created complex theories about blood types, circulation patterns, and vital essences that sounded scientific but were actually sophisticated marketing materials for human blood products. The same physicians who publicly condemned blood bathing as superstition were privately operating extraction facilities and supplying the underground blood trade. The most chilling innovation was the development of medical blood banks, institutions that appeared to be healing centers but were actually sophisticated human processing facilities. Patients would enter these facilities for treatment and emerge as unwitting donors to the blood bathing industry. The line between patient and product disappeared entirely, with the same person serving as both customer and commodity. The 18th century brought the concept of therapeutic bleeding into mainstream medicine. But this wasn't about healing, it was about normalizing blood extraction. By convincing the general population that blood removal was medically beneficial, the industry could harvest human blood on an unprecedented scale while maintaining the facade of legitimate medical practice. The victims were actually paying for their own exploitation. The Industrial Revolution accelerated this process exponentially. Steam-powered extraction equipment could process dozens of humans simultaneously. Refrigeration technology extended blood shelf life indefinitely. Railroad networks created continental distribution systems for human blood products. The scale of operation reached levels that made ancient blood bathing look like amateur experiments. But the real breakthrough came with the development of blood fractionation, the process of separating blood into component parts. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was about hiding the true scope of human exploitation. A single blood donation could be processed into dozens of different products, each sold to different markets for different purposes. The paper trail became so complex that tracking the human source became nearly impossible. The 19th century medical establishment created the perfect cover story, the myth of medical progress. Every advancement in blood processing technology was presented as a humanitarian breakthrough, when in reality it was an optimization of human exploitation systems. The same techniques used to extract blood for ancient bloodbaths were now being marketed as life-saving medical procedures. The most disturbing aspect was how completely this deception was. The general population began to view blood extraction not as exploitation, but as civic duty. People lined up voluntarily to donate blood, believing they were helping save lives, when much of that blood was actually being processed into luxury products for wealthy clients. The victims had been transformed into enthusiastic participants in their own exploitation. The pharmaceutical industry that emerged from this system was built on the same foundation as ancient blood trading, the conversion of human biological materials into profit. The only difference was scale and sophistication. Instead of individual blood merchants, there were corporate entities. Instead of local extraction facilities, there were global supply chains. Instead of obvious exploitation, there was medical legitimacy. The 20th century brought the final piece of the puzzle: legal protection for human exploitation. Medical licensing boards, pharmaceutical regulations, and international health organizations created a framework that made human blood harvesting not just legal, but legally protected. The same practices that were once considered barbaric were now considered essential medical services. The most horrifying realization is how this system operates today. Every blood donation, every plasma center, every medical procedure involving human biological materials is part of a network that traces directly back to ancient blood bathing practices. The motivations are the same: extracting human life force for the benefit of those who can afford it. The only difference is the sophistication of the extraction and distribution systems. Modern blood therapy treatments marketed to wealthy clients are identical in principle to ancient blood bathing. The plasma injections, the blood transfusions, the stem cell treatments, they're all variations on the same theme: rich people consuming the biological materials of poorer people under the guise of medical treatment. The Roman blood pools have been replaced by sterile medical facilities, but the transaction remains fundamentally unchanged. The cosmetic industry has embraced this heritage with remarkable honesty. Vampire facials and blood therapy treatments are marketed explicitly as rejuvenation procedures using human blood products. The clients know exactly what they're purchasing: youth extracted from other humans. The only difference from ancient practices is the price tag and the legal framework. But here's the most disturbing part. The medical establishment has become so sophisticated at hiding the true nature of these transactions that even the participants don't understand what they're involved in. Blood donors believe they're helping save lives. Plasma sellers think they're participating in legitimate medical research. Patients receiving blood products assume they're receiving life-saving treatment. None of them realize they're participating in a system that directly descends from the human exploitation practices of ancient blood bathing. The question isn't whether modern medicine still practices blood harvesting. The question is whether it ever stopped. And the answer becomes clear when you examine the profit margins of blood processing companies, the global trade in human biological materials, and the growing market for regenerative medicine treatments that promise to transfer youth and vitality from one human to another. The blood industry has achieved something remarkable. It has convinced its victims to participate voluntarily in their own exploitation. Ancient blood merchants had to use force and coercion to harvest human blood. Modern blood merchants have convinced people to line up and pay for the privilege of being harvested. It's the perfect crime. Exploitation disguised as altruism, predation marketed as healing, and human consumption rebranded as medical progress. And the most terrifying part? This is just the beginning. As you'll discover in the next part of this journey, the modern blood industry has ambitions that make ancient blood bathing look like child's play. They're not just harvesting blood anymore. They're harvesting everything. And they're using the same techniques that once filled Roman blood pools to create a new kind of human exploitation that operates on a global scale. The only difference between ancient blood bathing and modern blood medicine is that now the victims thank their exploiters for the privilege of being harvested. But the fundamental transaction remains the same: human life force, extracted from the many, consumed by the few. justified by promises of healing that never quite deliver what they promise. What I'm about to tell you will make you understand why your morning vitamin supplement costs more than a week's groceries in some countries, and why that life-saving medical treatment your insurance covers requires biological materials from people who will never be able to afford that same treatment. The blood industry didn't just evolve, it metastasized into a global network of human exploitation that makes ancient blood bathing look like a neighborhood lemonade stand. The 20th century brought the most horrifying development in human history, the industrialization of human biological harvesting on a planetary scale. World War I wasn't just a military conflict. It was a massive blood harvesting operation disguised as medical necessity. The blood drives to support wounded soldiers created the infrastructure for a permanent human biological extraction network. Millions of people were conditioned to view blood donation as patriotic duty, creating a renewable resource pipeline that continues to this day. But here's where it gets truly sinister. The medical establishment has discovered that wartime blood collection was just the beginning. They realized they could harvest not just blood, but plasma, bone marrow, organs, tissue, DNA, and even genetic material from the same human sources. The ancient Romans only dreamed of such comprehensive human exploitation. Modern medicine achieved it and made it legal, profitable, and socially celebrated. The post-war period saw the creation of what I call biological colonialism, the systematic extraction of human biological materials from poor populations to serve wealthy populations. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America became human farms for Western pharmaceutical companies. The same logic that drove ancient blood bathing, the belief that life force could be transferred from one human to another, now operates on a continental scale. The most disturbing example is the global plasma trade. The United States, which represents 4% of the world's population, provides 70% of the world's plasma supply. But this isn't altruistic donation, it's economic exploitation. The people selling their plasma are overwhelmingly poor, desperate, and trapped in cycles of biological exploitation that can last their entire lives. They're literally selling their life force to survive, while that same life force is processed into luxury medical treatments for wealthy clients. The pharmaceutical industry has perfected the art of what they call biological arbitrage, buying human biological materials cheaply from poor populations and selling them expensively to wealthy populations. A single plasma donation that pays $50 to the donor can be processed into medical products worth thousands of dollars. The profit margins are so extreme that human biological materials have become more valuable than gold, oil, or any other commodity. But the real horror is in the global supply chain. Human biological materials are harvested in countries with minimal regulatory oversight, processed in facilities with questionable safety standards, and distributed through networks that prioritize profit over human welfare. The same person's blood might be processed in 3 different countries before ending up in a medical facility thousands of miles away from the original donor. The modern blood industry has created what economists call biological debt. Entire populations trapped in cycles of biological exploitation where they must continuously sell their bodily materials to survive. In some regions, families plan their biological donations like other people plan their work schedules. Children grow up knowing they'll eventually need to sell their blood, plasma, or other biological materials to support their families. The most chilling aspect is how this system operates under the guise of medical necessity. The World Health Organization, the Red Cross, and other international health organizations actively promote and facilitate this global biological exploitation network. They've created a framework where human biological harvesting is not just legal but morally mandated. The victims are told they're helping save lives, when in reality they're feeding a global luxury medical industry. The technological advancement in biological processing has reached levels that would astound ancient blood bathers. Modern facilities can process thousands of donors simultaneously, extract and separate dozens of different biological products from each donation, and distribute those products to markets around the world within hours. The scale and efficiency of modern human biological harvesting makes ancient blood bathing look primitive and inefficient. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. The industry has moved beyond simple biological extraction. They're now harvesting genetic material, creating biological profiles, and developing personalized medical products based on specific human genetic characteristics. The same person's biological materials can be used to create dozens of different medical products, each tailored to specific wealthy clients' genetic profiles. The emergence of regenerative medicine has created a new category of biological exploitation. Wealthy clients can now purchase treatments that use biological materials from multiple donors to create personalized rejuvenation therapies. These treatments promise to reverse aging, enhance cognitive function, and extend lifespan, using the same principles that drove ancient blood bathing, but with industrial scale efficiency and scientific precision. The most disturbing development is the creation of biological futures markets, financial instruments that allow investors to speculate on future human biological material harvesting. Wall Street traders now buy and sell contracts for human blood, plasma, and genetic material like they trade oil or wheat futures. Human biological materials have become a commodity class with their own market indices, investment strategies, and profit optimization model. The pharmaceutical industry has created vertical integration of human exploitation. They control the donation center, the processing facilities, the distribution networks, and the medical facilities that administer the final products. The same companies that harvest human biological materials also sell the treatments made from those materials. It's a closed loop of exploitation where the victims pay twice. Once, when they donate their biological materials, and again when they need medical treatment. The global nature of this industry means that regulatory oversight is virtually impossible. A pharmaceutical company can harvest biological materials in a country with minimal regulations, process them in a country with tax advantages, and sell them in a country with premium pricing. The paper trail is so complex that tracking the human source of any biological medical product is nearly impossible. The most horrifying realization is how this system has created a new form of human slavery. People trapped in biological exploitation cycles can never escape because they become dependent on the income from selling their biological materials. They're literally consuming their own life force to survive, while that same life force is processed into luxury products for people who will never face such desperate circumstances. The modern blood industry has achieved something that ancient blood bathers could never accomplish. They've convinced their victims that exploitation is empowerment. Blood donors are told they're heroes. Plasma sellers are told they're providing essential medical services. Genetic material donors are told they're advancing medical science. None of them realize they're participating in a global system of biological exploitation that directly descends from ancient blood bathing practices. The question isn't whether this system will continue, it's whether it will expand. And as you'll discover in the next part of this journey, the industry has plans that make current biological exploitation look like preparation for something far more sinister. They're not just harvesting human biological materials anymore, they're redesigning human biology itself. And they're using the same techniques that once filled Roman blood pools to create a new kind of human that exists solely to serve as biological raw material for those who can afford it. The global blood industry has become exactly what ancient blood bathers dreamed of: a renewable source of human life force that can be harvested indefinitely, processed efficiently, and distributed globally. The only difference is scale, sophistication, and the remarkable achievement of convincing the victims to participate voluntarily in their own exploitation. You think what I've told you so far is disturbing? You haven't seen anything yet? What I'm about to reveal will make you understand why certain genetic research is classified, why some pharmaceutical patents are sealed for national security reasons, and why the wealthiest people on Earth are suddenly investing billions in longevity research. The blood industry isn't just harvesting existing humans anymore, they're designing new ones. And they're using the same logic that drove ancient blood bathing to create a future where human beings exist solely as biological raw material for those who can afford to consume them. The breakthrough came in the early 21st century with the development of CRISPR gene editing technology. But this wasn't just about correcting genetic diseases. It was about optimizing human beings for biological harvesting. The same pharmaceutical companies that have been exploiting human biological materials for decades realized they could engineer humans to produce more valuable biological products. They could create people specifically designed to serve as living factories for medical treatments. The first experiments were conducted under the guise of therapeutic research. Genetic modifications that supposedly help treat rare diseases were actually optimization protocols for enhanced biological production. Humans were being engineered to produce blood with higher concentrations of specific proteins, plasma with enhanced healing properties, and genetic material with improved therapeutic potential. The victims weren't patients, they were prototypes for human biological manufacturing. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. The industry realized they could create entire populations of genetically modified humans who would be biologically dependent on the pharmaceutical industry for survival. These modified humans would require ongoing medical treatments that could only be provided by the same companies that created them. It's the perfect business model. Create the product, create the dependency, and control both the supply and demand sides of the market. The most disturbing development is the creation of what industry insiders call biological castes, genetically distinct populations designed for specific types of biological exploitation. Some modified humans are optimized for blood production, others for plasma generation, others for organ harvesting compatibility. They're creating a new kind of human hierarchy based not on social class, but on biological utility. The technology has advanced to the point where they can design humans with specific biological characteristics tailored to individual wealthy clients. A billionaire with a rare genetic condition can commission the creation of humans whose biological materials are perfectly compatible with their specific medical needs. It's personalized medicine taken to its logical extreme. Personalized humans created solely to serve as biological raw material for specific wealthy individuals. The most chilling aspect is how the system operates under the guise of reproductive freedom and genetic therapy. Couples seeking fertility treatments are offered genetic enhancement options that are actually biological optimization protocols. Parents think they're giving their children genetic advantages when they're actually creating living commodities for the pharmaceutical industry. The regulatory framework has been carefully constructed to make this exploitation legal and profitable. Genetic modification research is classified as medical research, which receives government funding and regulatory protection. The modified humans are classified as research subjects, not victims, which means they have no legal rights or protections. The entire system is designed to legitimize the creation of humans for biological exploitation. The industry has developed what they call biological futures planning, long-term strategies for managing populations of modified humans over multiple generations. They're not just creating individual biological commodities, they're designing entire bloodlines optimized for specific types of biological harvesting. Children are born already designated for specific roles in the biological exploitation network. The most horrifying innovation is the development of biological subscription services, ongoing relationships where wealthy clients receive regular deliveries of biological materials from their designated modified humans. These aren't one-time transactions. They're lifetime commitments where specific humans exist solely to provide biological materials to specific wealthy individuals. It's slavery, but with genetic engineering and legal protection. The pharmaceutical industry has created what economists call biological derivatives, financial instruments based on the future biological productivity of modified humans. Investors can buy shares in specific genetic modifications, bet on the biological output of modified populations, and trade contracts for future biological harvesting rights. The stock market now includes human biological materials as a commodity class. The most disturbing realization is how this system has created a new form of human breeding. Modified humans are bred specifically for biological characteristics that maximize their exploitation value. Their genetic profiles are optimized for specific biological products, their lifespans are calculated based on optimal harvesting schedules, and their reproductive capabilities are controlled to ensure sustainable biological production. The global nature of this industry means that modified humans can be created in countries with minimal regulatory oversight and their biological materials distributed globally. The same genetic modification that creates a modified human in one country can be used to create identical biological commodities in dozens of other countries. It's industrial-scale human manufacturing disguised as medical research. The most chilling aspect is how the system has eliminated the need for consent or awareness. Modified humans can be created without their knowledge or consent, their biological materials harvested without their awareness, and their entire lives controlled without their understanding. They exist in a state of engineered ignorance, designed to serve as biological raw material without ever realizing their true purpose. The industry has achieved something that ancient bloodbathers could never imagine. They've created humans who exist solely to be consumed by other humans. These modified humans have no independent existence, no autonomous rights, and no purpose beyond serving as biological raw material for wealthy clients. They're living, breathing, thinking humans who were designed from birth to be harvested. The question isn't whether this system will expand, it's whether it will become the dominant form of human existence. The industry has plans to modify larger and larger populations, creating a world where the majority of humans exist solely to serve as biological raw material for a small elite. It's the ultimate evolution of the logic that drove ancient bloodbathing, the systematic conversion of human life into consumable commodity. The most terrifying part is how normalized this has become. Genetic modification is marketed as medical advancement, biological harvesting is presented as healthcare, human exploitation is rebranded as scientific progress. The victims don't even realize they're victims because they've been engineered to accept their exploitation as natural and necessary. But here's what makes this truly horrifying for you. Sitting there in your comfortable ignorance, the industry has already begun the transition. The genetic modifications are already being implemented. The biological castes are already being created. The modified humans are already being harvested. And the wealthy clients are already consuming the biological materials extracted from humans who were designed specifically to serve their needs. The only question remaining is whether you'll be one of the consumers or one of the consumed. And as you'll discover in the final part of this journey, that decision might not be yours to make. The industry has plans that will determine the biological future of humanity itself. And they're using the same techniques that once filled Roman blood pools to create a world where human beings exist solely as biological raw material for those who can afford to consume them. The future of humanity isn't about technological advancement or social progress. It's about the systematic conversion of human life into consumable commodity. And the blood industry has finally achieved what ancient bloodbathers could only dream of, a world where human beings are designed, created, and harvested specifically to serve as biological raw material for those wealthy enough to consume them. Stop. Right now, stop and think about the last time you donated blood, the last time you took a vitamin supplement, the last time you received a medical treatment involving human biological materials. That comfortable feeling you had, that sense of doing good, that belief that you were participating in something beneficial, that feeling is exactly what the Roman elite felt when they sank into pools of fresh human blood. You think you're different from them? You think you're more civilized? You're not. You're just participating in a more sophisticated version of the same system. Every single person watching this has already been integrated into the global biological exploitation network. Every blood donation you've made, every plasma center you've visited, every genetic test you've taken, all of it feeds into the same system that once filled Roman blood pools with human suffering. The only difference is that now you thank them for the privilege of being harvested. That DNA test you took to learn about your ancestry, that genetic information is now part of a global database used to identify optimal biological donors for wealthy clients. Your genetic profile has been analyzed, categorized, and potentially assigned a biological utility value. You might already be designated as a future biological resource for someone you'll never meet. The vitamin supplements you take every morning, many of them contain processed human biological materials. The natural ingredients listed on the label often include proteins, enzymes, and other substances extracted from human donors. You're literally consuming other humans while believing you're improving your health. The ancient Romans would admire the elegance of this deception. That medical treatment you received that involved blood products or plasma, you were participating in the same biological transfer system that drove ancient blood bathing. Someone else's life force was processed and injected into your body. You became a consumer of human biological materials, just like the Roman elite who soaked in blood pools. The only difference is the delivery method. The most disturbing realization is how completely unaware you are of your participation. The system has become so sophisticated that consumers don't even realize they're consuming human biological materials. The processing, marketing, and distribution networks are designed to hide the human source of medical products. You're practicing a form of biological cannibalism while believing you're receiving advanced medical care. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. The system has already identified you as either a consumer or a commodity. Your economic status, your genetic profile, your medical history, and your biological characteristics have all been analyzed to determine your role in the global biological exploitation network. If you're wealthy enough, you'll be offered premium biological products derived from other humans. If you're not, you'll be encouraged to become a biological donor yourself. The subscription services are already operational. Wealthy clients receive regular deliveries of biological materials from designated human sources. They might receive weekly plasma infusions, monthly genetic therapies, or quarterly organ tissue treatments. All of these products are derived from humans who exist solely to serve as biological raw material for paying clients. The most chilling aspect is how normalized this has become in your daily life. The health and wellness industry that promotes blood therapy, plasma treatments, and genetic optimization is just the consumer-facing side of the human biological exploitation network. When you see celebrities promoting vampire facials or blood therapy treatments, you're seeing the modern equivalent of Roman blood bathing, complete with the same elite clientele and the same human exploitation. The pharmaceutical industry has achieved something remarkable. They've convinced you to pay for your own exploitation. You pay for medical treatments that use biological materials extracted from other humans. You pay for supplements that contain processed human biological products. You pay for genetic tests that add your biological profile to their harvesting databases. You're simultaneously victim and customer, predator and prey, in a system designed to extract biological value from human existence. The most disturbing truth is that you can't escape this system. Every interaction with modern medicine involves participating in the biological exploitation network. Every medical procedure, every pharmaceutical product, every health supplement connects you to the same system that once filled Roman blood pools with human suffering. The only choice you have is whether you'll be conscious of your participation or remain in comfortable ignorance. The genetic modifications are already being implemented. The biological casts are already being created. The modified humans are already being harvested. And the wealthy clients are already consuming biological materials extracted from humans who were designed specifically to serve their needs. The transition from traditional human exploitation to engineered human exploitation is happening right now while you watch Netflix and scroll through social media. The most horrifying realization is that you might not have a choice about your role in the system. Your genetic profile, your economic status, and your biological characteristics might have already determined whether you'll be a consumer or a commodity. The industry has plans that will determine the biological future of humanity itself. An individual choice might be irrelevant to those plans. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. The system has become so sophisticated that it can operate without your awareness or consent. The biological materials can be harvested from you without your knowledge. The genetic modifications can be implemented without your understanding. The entire system can transform you from autonomous human being into biological commodity without you ever realizing what happened. The ancient Romans who bathed in human blood at least acknowledged what they were doing. They knew they were consuming other humans for personal benefit. They understood the transaction. You don't. You participate in human consumption while believing you're receiving medical care. You contribute to human exploitation while thinking you're helping others. You support biological cannibalism while believing you're advancing human health. The question isn't whether you'll participate in this system. You already are. The question is whether you'll acknowledge your participation or continue pretending that modern medicine is fundamentally different from ancient blood bathing. The question is whether you'll accept your role as biological commodity or fight to maintain your autonomy as a human being. The blood industry has achieved its ultimate goal, the complete integration of human biological exploitation into daily life. Every person in the modern world is either consuming human biological materials or being consumed by the system that processes humans into biological materials. The Roman blood pools have been replaced by global networks of biological extraction and distribution, but the fundamental transaction remains the same. The most chilling realization is that this system will continue to expand until it encompasses all human existence. The industry has plans to modify larger and larger populations, creating a world where human beings exist solely to serve as biological raw material for those who can afford to consume them. And they're using the same techniques that once filled Roman blood pools to create a future where humanity itself becomes a commodity. The only difference between you and the Romans who bathed in human blood is that you don't acknowledge what you're doing. You participate in human consumption while maintaining moral superiority. You benefit from human exploitation while believing you're innocent. You contribute to biological cannibalism while thinking you're civilized. But the blood never washed off the Romans, and it won't wash off you. Every time you receive a medical treatment involving human biological materials, every time you take a supplement containing processed human products, every time you participate in the biological exploitation network, you're soaking in the same human blood that filled ancient Roman pools. The only question remaining is whether you'll continue pretending you're different from them, or whether you'll finally acknowledge that you're participating in the same system of human exploitation that has persisted for thousands of years. The system has just become more sophisticated, more legally protected, and more socially acceptable, but it's still the same system, and you're still soaking in human blood. You just don't want to admit it.